Good afternoon, everybody. Oliver Joyce from Whiskeybarrel Studios. Today, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my plans for 2019. Game dev related plans, of course. You don't really care about my personal life plans, or maybe you do. Maybe you don't. Who knows? Plan on maybe getting a new bathroom in the house. Nah, that kind of stuff is not interesting. What I wanted to talk about is, in particular, the next few games I want to make. And they're still kind of kicking around in my head. And I talked a little bit about this in the last video, the Sword and Sandals Pirates retrospective video from last week. But I want to go into a bit more detail about that. I have been building a sort of choose your own adventure style graphic novel. Actually, it's not even a graphic novel. It's more an interactive book that I've been writing on the train. Mostly every day, or not every day, but most days since about March or April this year. And it's been very slow going, but I'm up to about 24,000 words now and about 360 entries in there. It's a pretty sprawling game, really. And it basically details the adventures of a hero journeying to a mysterious island where he has to make his way through the Tower of Bargle, the mysterious sorcerer who is one of the sort of antagonists, or meddlers in the events of the Swords and Sandals series throughout the games. He was one of the ones that helped defeat Antares and so on. But it's a pretty cool interactive game book if you like those kind of things. I'm working on that, and that will still be probably worked on for the next 4 or 5 months while I finish the story. It's probably about 75% complete. I'm no hurry to do that, but it's going to be a fun little project that I'll release on Steam and the app stores and so on. It is by no means a major project, and it's something that is really for fans of things like fighting fantasy and choose your own adventure, and of course fans of Sword and Sandals and the lore of that. But it's not the major stuff I'm working on, just something that I'm doing in the background. But that's the first thing. The second thing I want to talk to you about is a game that my publisher and I have been talking about for the last year or so, chronicling the adventures of the famous real-life gladiator Spartacus. He of the "I am Spartacus" fame. I believe it was Kirk Douglas played Spartacus back in the day in the classic movie from maybe the 50s, before my time certainly, but I do remember seeing it as a kid. My dad is very into movies and cinema and made sure I saw all the great films as a kid. That and Ben-Hur and Robin Hood with Errol Flynn, and that really kind of got me, pretty into the adventure and fantasy historical genres, and I think it reflects in the work that I do. But Spartacus is a great story, and it tells the story of basically a slave who became a gladiator, who then went on to free other slaves and lead a gladiator rebellion against the forces of Rome. It's been detailed in cinema and of course the TV show Spartacus a few years ago on Stars. And it's just a really cool story. And so what my publisher and I have talked about is actually building a game featuring Spartacus. The actual details of the game are still being worked out, but I want this to be a kind of a cool action platformer style game. You play Spartacus going through the dungeons of Rome, fighting Roman soldiers, jumping over traps, climbing stuff. A little bit kind of Rastan Saga, Tiny Barbarian, that kind of game. A dark platformer, maybe pixel art style with copious amounts of blood, darker in tone than the Swords and Sandals series, going through history. And I think that will be a really fun project. I've done some experiments in the past on platform games, but I've never really made a platform adventure game that I can truly be proud of, and something that I think you guys would love. This will be the first project in Unity, which, as many of you may know, is a very, very popular, if not the most popular tool for making games in the modern era. Certainly that and Unreal, and to a lesser extent Game Maker. In the past, I've used a tool called Adobe Air, which is and a framework called Starling, which is basically a graphically enhanced version of Flash. And if you know anything about Sword and Sandals, you know that its heyday was in the Flash era, and most of the fans of Sword and Sandals came to the series through Flash. Flash has had a great run. It is pretty much dead on the web now, but it's still used to make a lot of apps that you wouldn't really know, and some apps that you would, and certainly a few games like the Banner Saga. The first one was made in Flash, in Adobe Air, basically, and of course the Sword and Sandals series up to this point. But I've just run into a lot of technical limitations with it, as I mentioned in the other video. There's just a lot of things that I can't do in Air and Starling anymore. Things like dynamic lighting and nice shadows and reflections on the ships, really nice particle effects, all the visual eye candy that you want from modern games. 3D has been out of the question. I haven't been able to port the games to PlayStation and Switch and all the things that a lot of people ask for. So the time has come for me to make the switch to Unity. I've done a bit of Unity work in the past. Not that much. I made a game for the App Store called Dark Rolls, which was a bit of a play on Dark Souls. It was just a Marble Madness style game through a sort of Dark Souls kind of world. It didn't do very well, and I don't think it's available on the App Stores anymore. But no loss, it was a fun thing to build. But that was about 4 years ago, really, and so I'll kind of be coming to Unity fresh, and what I want to do is actually chronicle my game dev progress in a series of video logs such as this one, so you can come along from the ride. And as we build the next games, I want to just do a video every 2 or 3 days or every week, and just show you what I'm learning about Unity and what and how the progress has been made. And I did a little bit of that in Pirates, but I want to do a lot more and take you along for the ride from the very beginning. And if you're interested in game development, maybe you might learn something as I learn things. And the other game that I want to start working on in January, February, after I've done a bunch of Unity tutorials, is a Swords and Sandals related game. Sword and Sandals branded, of course, in that universe. Not Sword and Sandals 6 yet, but that will be coming later in the year once these projects are finished. I don't want to jump into that project just yet because I don't feel I know enough about Unity to really be able to tackle a game of that kind of scope and magnitude. The game I want to build in the meantime is actually a 3D game, and the first 3D game in the Sword and Sandals universe. Consider a top-down perspective game. The camera's up here, set in an arena and the dungeons below it, with a bunch of gladiators that all enter the dungeon one at a time, every 20 seconds, or a whole bunch at once. They all may run in from different areas. And it's kind of, Running Man, Hunger Games, Battle Royale is very popular, a term for it these days, but it's basically the last gladiator standing, or the teams of gladiators. Fast-paced action, with still power-ups and skills and weapons and armor and all the things that make Sword and Sandals. But instead of the sort of plodding turn-based nature of the previous games, I want this to be a more arcade action style game. Think of Gauntlet, think of Diablo 2, and think of those sort of top-down games where you're running through a dungeon fighting things. A little bit like that. If that sort of piques your interest, let me know. I'll be teaming up with a great friend of mine, Jeff Wicks, who is a really good 3D modeler and who's already done a bit of preliminary work on the 3D models for this. And from what we've tested so far, I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised. This isn't going to be some horrible game that looks like a PlayStation 1 game and doesn't feel like a Sword and Sandals game. If I'm going to do a 3D Sword and Sandals, I want it to feel like a Sword and Sandals game, and I won't release it unless it has that look and feel to it. And finally, and so that will be worked on in concurrency with the Spartacus games. So I don't have a deadline for these or an ETA because I haven't even started work on them yet. I'll begin planning the end of this month and in early January, and probably start coding them at the end of January. I'm going to take a little bit of time off between now and then to play some games and relax with the family and so on. Enjoy Christmas and play some other games because there are awesome games out there that I haven't really had much time to play. But once those games are built, the time will have come to work on Swords and Sandals 6. And there are no details about that other than what I mentioned in the last video. I plan to have it multiplayer. I'd love to have a much more detailed combat engine that sort of takes the best of Swords and Sandals 2 and Swords and Sandals 3 and puts them into one big... Oh, let's change the light in there. There we go. Don't know why I did that. It made me think of something. How cool is that? I got dynamic lighting on my shelf. My wife hates it. Multiplayer and the best of Swords and Sandals 2, best of Swords and Sandals 3, plus obstacles, things to climb, destructible terrain, all interesting things. I don't really want to make another Swords and Sandals arena game unless I can do something cool and interesting with it. And it's actually been quite a while since the last pure arena game. Swords and Sandals 3 was the last one, and that's a decade ago. So I've been making all these other games in the Swords and Sandals world and beyond. And I think people are crying out for another arena one. So you'll be getting it, I promise you. It just might not come out until 2021. Anyway, that's it for today. I will be making an announcement on the release of Swords and Sandals Pirates on mobile real soon, next few days hopefully, so stay tuned for that. And thanks to everyone who've played Swords and Sandals Pirates, and everybody who of course subscribed to the channel and all the comments, and you're great fans. I love you all. You really do make the Swords and Sandals world and the process of making these games so much more fun, just to have fans that care about the stuff that I do, and so I don't feel like I'm developing in a vacuum. All right, that's it. Back to work for now to finish off Pirates for mobile, and I will see you real soon. Bye for now.